Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Japanese Shabu podcast. Uh, we're going to be talking about some anime today. We're going to first off start off with Takopi's Original Sin, episode 2. So, once again, Takopi's Original Sin gives you a fair warning that there's going to be like violence and acts towards children and all these other triggering things for the anime as per usual. But as you'll see on the what I'll have up will be some semi uh, bad images or some very happy images, and it starts off with Shizuka, and she's about to answer this question, and Marina just kind of like is in her own little space, and Shizuka's looking over at her, trembling like, oh, she's not gonna like if I answer correctly. So you can still see that there's a lot of fear in Shizuka, and she still very much is afraid of Marina and what she's capable of, and even Takopi knows what she's capable of. So it's really even worse because doesn't even acknowledge her when she looks at her. She just kind of like nods and looks away. So you instantly can feel that Marina is probably plotting something even more devious than before. So Shizuka and Takopi are kind of heading home, and Shizuka kind of is telling Takopi about all the stuff with her dad and how she used to love going to walks with her dad and stuff. But at one point, they stopped going towards walks, and her dad and her mom started having issues, and they pretty much got to a point where they needed to divorce, and Shizuka tried to ask or pray slash wish that her parents would stay together and not get this divorce. But because her wishes didn't end up coming true, she stopped believing that things such as God or magic existed in the world, which we know in previous episode, in the previous episode, episode 1, she was telling Takopi that she doesn't believe in magic or any of that sort, and this is the reason why, because she has had such a bad past that now it's affecting how she views the world now, how she views the world in a darker tone, and Takopi obviously being kind of like the opposite, where he's trying to look at everything in the positive side and tries to get Shizuka to understand that there's still magic in the world, and he wants to show her that so that she can be happy. But yeah, then they kind of like meet Marina somewhere as they're walking, and he Takopi remembers at one point how the day that they're currently on is the day that Shizuka ended up taking her own life, and the reason why she ended up taking it was because she showed up with Chappie's collar, but not with Chappie. So once he saw that Chappie uh, bit uh, Marina, and that made it so that Chappie had to be taken away or get put down, Takopi kind of put one and two together. So now he understood that in order for Shizuka to remain happy and not have to worry about her doing something terrible to end her own life, he had to make sure that Chappie and Shizuka stayed together. So he kind of started using his little gadget to go back in time to redo everything over again. But except this time, no matter how far he went, no matter which route he took, or no matter how hard he tried to make sure they never met Marina that day, the it was kind of inevitable that they would meet her because she was actively looking for them. So no matter what Takopi did, they were going to meet Marina, and Chappie was going to be taken away. And in doing so, now we get told that basically the dog's going to go back to their Shizuka's father, because it belonged to him originally, and the mother we see the mother for the first time, and she's pretty much almost in the same realm as Marina's mother, except not as manipulative, but she's still very absent as a mother to Shizuku, and she kind of lets her know like what you're doing, all this problems you're causing for Marina. The one that's gonna have to deal with the father, and it's gonna make me look bad when I have to try to save face in front of him and try to get him to understand that you didn't mean any harm. So instead of the mother kind of like checking to make sure Shizuku was okay from the dog being taken away, or just in general, just even seeing her appearance, just kind of trying to gauge how she's feeling, or see if anything's going on, why Marina and her are kind of fighting with one another. She decides to just kind of like toss that to the side, focus on her own relationship with Marina's father, and try to make amends in that, and basically leaving Shizuka to pretty much take care of herself, like even telling her like you'll have to make yourself dinner tonight. Well, she has to go and escort Marina's dad. So it is very telling that the, both Marina and Shizuku kind of have had their parents abandon them in a way. The mother being very manipulative towards her, kind of abandoning her mother position to try to make it so that Marina hates her father, and because of all the verbal abuse or even physical abuse, as we see, Marina ends up having like this bruised up cheek at one point. She ends up taking all that frustration that she's feeling in her own home and takes it out on Shizuku. And Shizuku is in the same position where she doesn't have a motherly figure either, or a fatherly figure, because the father left and the mother's nowhere to be seen, just always with Marina's father. But in her case, she ends up just kind of feeling defeated, giving in to depression, trying to basically giving up on life. Because no matter what she did, everybody was putting her down. Whether it was her mother, then it's Marina, and it seemed like aside from Takopi and Chappie, nobody really cared for her. And we have now they go back to school, and school is just another brutal reminder that people did not care about Shizuku, and they were even berating her like, "Oh, you let your wild animal attack Marina, and now she suffered serious injury. How could you do that?" You know, like kind of instead of like realizing that Marina's been bullying her, Marina spins it around to the point where everybody thinks um, dog is the one. Shizuku's dog is the one that bit her with basically for no good reason, and now Shizuku's being bullied by the rest of the class, and even more so being more bullied by Marina. But Shizuka is at a point in her life now that Chappie's gone, to where she she the remarks that Marina has said don't even like face her anymore. Like you can just see she's fully rock bottom in the dumps, not necessarily barely even alive, barely even looking alive at this point. And we have later after school, they try to bully her, or like after class they try to bully her some more, and one of the good friends with the glasses kind of steps in and gives Shizuka the breathing room she needed to kind of get away from them, but that still was not enough to like get a good reaction out of her. So it's really heartening to see how much life has been taken away from Shizuku ever since Happy left, or Chappie left. And then we have the after school meeting with Marina and Shizuka again, and once again, Takopi, bless his soul, is still like trying to see the silver lining, because now that Chappie's no longer there, Shizuku's still there. Maybe he thought, oh, this is the perfect opportunity for you two to become really good friends, get to hash things out. There's nothing coming between you guys now. And Marina uh, remembers how her family dysfunction was, and how the father and mother were always fighting with one another. And now that the and this is was practically when Marina's father started seeing Shizuka's mother, and it ended up ending with the current situation that she has now, where she's now basically just with her mother, and her mother being manipulative towards her. And you can really see the anger she holds for Shizuku, who's practically because of her father living off Marina's father's money, and she takes it out on Shizuku once again because her life has gone to hell ever since her family started getting involved in hers. And Takopi was like so scared as he kept remembering back to the point where that to the point of last episode where Marina was stabbing him with a pencil and beating him. It You could really tell the fear was really ingrained in Takopi, and also you could really see Shizuku was just taking the beating, just pretty much giving herself away to, oh, whatever happens with what Marina is doing is I'll just let it be. I have no more further reason to live. And that's when Takopi ends up getting this sudden burst of courage and attacks Marina with the camera gadget that allowed him to go back in time. And then next thing you know, Marina's just laying there in the floor with blood all over, and the camera is like dripping in blood. And now Takopi realized, oh shoot, I just ended up killing Marina, which is gonna be very interesting, as Happy is not, because he's from the Happy Takopi's from the Happy Planet. That planet doesn't know what killing is. That planet never dealt with what it means to take a life. So he's very naive into what he has just done. Maybe he doesn't realize how big of a deal this is, and it's gonna be really interesting to see how Takopi takes things, because as he did the deed, Shizuku starts coming to life. So in a way, Takopi finally was able to do what he set out to do, which was make Shizuku happy, grant her one of her wishes. And Shizuku let him know, like, well, I had completely given up that wishes and gods existed, but you just took out Marina. I have been wishing that for a long time, and you just finally made it a reality, so thank you, Takopi. And it just goes to show how both of them are pretty naive as to the severity of the situation. Shizuka just thinks, oh, well, now I finally got rid of this weight that was on me, and I no longer have to worry about my bully beating me, stabbing me. I can just finally be free from this hell that she was putting me through. Whereas Takopi now has to come with the grips of, oh, I just took a life, has to deal with the repercussions of, oh, dealing with that, understanding his feelings to the act he just did, realizing, and really come to grips with what it is he wants to do moving forward. Because now that he's taken a life, what's he gonna feel? Is he gonna feel happy? Is he gonna feel saddened? What's really gonna happen to somebody that's never experienced hardship, that's never had to get his hands dirty, that's always known only the purest of hearts? Is he no longer gonna be as pure-hearted as we've seen him in these past two episodes? Is he gonna become a little less reluctant to committing violence now? What is gonna happen? That is really interesting stuff to ask ourselves now that we see Takopi has ended a human life. But I love that after this ends up happening, he no longer is able to have a do over because the camera that he used to go back in time is covered in blood and no longer works. So now you can see that this is where Takopi's real story is now finally starting to take place. Because from here on out, he no longer gets to have his do-overs. He can no longer mess up anymore. Whatever ends up happening from here on out is here to stay. So there's no bringing Marina back. Only time will tell what's gonna happen later. Like who's gonna notice that Marina's gone? How are they gonna convince people that, or how are they gonna cover it up? I should say, in in the later in the next episode or so. So really, really great stuff from Takopi's original sin. I This episode to me is a 8 out of 10. Up next, we have Call of the Night, season 2, episode 1. I really, really love this anime. I'm glad it's having its return, and it comes back swinging with a very amazing opening by Creepy Nuts. Once again, visuals are incredible. The music just flows so well, and it is definitely gonna go on my playlist. That's for sure. Really interesting the way it opens up though with the anime with Nasuna just looking over the edge, looking like she's ready to jump off a cliff, which she does, kind of having like a trust fall. And we see this point of view of somebody like diving together, which I think this is kind of like a spoiler of what's to come. I think this is in the future when Ko or Yamori uh, is finally going to become a vampire, and we're seeing his point of view as he's falling to save her, or jumping over to save her. And we keep getting, after that it gets kind of cut, and we go back to when Nasuna and Ko were just hanging out in her place and just playing video games, and they have the other vampires from the secret society just there, kind of like looking over them, trying to get their attention, until they finally do, and they kind of separate the two. One of them goes with Nasuna, and then the main lady gets Ko to go with the rest of the crew. And I really love that in this episode it was more so getting to know the kind of mindset that both of them have towards one another. Like the ladies were trying to find out, like, first of all, how Ko felt about Nasuna, and also like kind of pry into their love life, or like it lack thereof in their case. And they really thought, because they kissed in front of them, that they had a little bit more spice in their relationship, but it didn't turn out to be that way. And the one that went with Nasuna, was trying to like get her prepped and get her to feel pretty, to the point where she felt comfortable enough to try to seduce or try to get Ko's attention more, so that he falls in love a lot quicker. And I love that this really kind of is them kind of going through the motions, kind of seeing uh, perspectives in their relationships, and especially from starting off with Nasuna, how she has been kind of taking a step back, or kind of like avoiding her own feelings towards Ko, and she's been masking them with dirty jokes. And the one that's hanging out with her, kind of calls her out on it, like, hey, you should really be more open and honest with your feelings, because I noticed that whenever it comes to love, you're one of the one that wants it the most, but since you always get shy, and you put a wall around it by making it dirty, as to not to have a way to to avoid the confrontation, or to avoid expressing those feelings that you have. And Nasuna realized that, she started going into panic mode, and realized that, okay, well, I have to avoid this, and she orders a bunch of beers to get drunk, and she ends up sleeping and slash passing out, and Ko gets called up. And with Ko's whole group together with the other vampire ladies, he kind of lets them know, like, I don't know, I feel kind of indifferent. Like, I've never really known what it's like to fall in love. I This is all new to me. Like, I want it to happen, but I'm not necessarily sure when or how it's gonna happen. And a lot of them are kind of like envious of Nasuna, who gets to be Ko's first love and the one that gets to turn him. And one of them gets drunk enough to the point where she actually admits, "Oh, I wish I could be the one that turns you into a vampire." And the other ladies pretty much conclude, yes, we would all love to be somebody's first and be the ones that gets to turn them into a vampire. And we have to really start to see them as Ko gets told, like, maybe you'll start developing feelings if you start telling her how pretty she looks or how cute she looks every day. Small small acts of gratitude or small acts of kindness or affection will probably lead you to develop feelings for her. So when Ko goes to pick up Nasuna, he starts practicing what they told him. He starts saying, "Wow, you look pretty today," because he's carrying her. And I think he's practicing more so to be like, confirm with himself, like, yes, it'll work, or yes, I can do it, and to see if it has any effect at to how he feels about her. But as he's practicing, he doesn't realize that she actually wakes up in the middle of him practicing, so she overhears him telling her that she's looking pretty cute tonight, and she gets blush and shy from it. And then we cut to them going into a train somewhere, because they both, well, Nasuna realized that they both want Ko to fall in love, but they don't necessarily know how to make do of that process, or how to get into that relationship that involves love and involves having a deeper connection with the person. And they go to Tokyo to do kind of like field research into that aspect. And at first, Ko was kind of like taken back, like, I don't get why people feel the need to have this love for Tokyo or this admiration for Tokyo. And Nasuna kind of takes offense to that and slaps him a bit, because she's one of those people that has kind of this view of Tokyo, and she views it in kind of like an affectionate way. And having Ko be the one that kind of like tries to shut down that image that she holds of Tokyo is kind of like betraying her feelings and betraying. She feels kind of a bit betrayed that Ko would make her feelings feel inferior. So once Ko realized that, he's like, okay, well, what are we actually doing here? And she tells them all about that they're there to gather research, and they go to this place, to this alley where a lot of couples or a lot of people tend to like talk and hook up. And Ko was like, okay, how did this actually help us research and understand what falling in love is like? And I love the explanation that Nasuna gives them, which is like, love is kind of like a gamble, and one of the ways that we can do that is by starting off with the physical relationship. And at first, Ko was kind of taken back, where it's like, that doesn't really seem right. And he's like, and Nasuna kind of explains to him, if you really think about it, our relationship has started off in a physical aspect. Our relationship, basically, a physical aspect involves a person just uh, having sex and not having to really put any emotional thought into it, not being detached from the act of love, from the affectionate or that is required from love, and it can actually, because they start, some people can start off just in a physical attraction that would eventually blossom into having an emotional aspect to it, and being growing closer to one another as they start missing one another and stuff like that. So she says that they're in that physical aspect of love where, because she's drinking blood from him, it's kind of killing two needs in one go, which is her hunger and also her sex drive. So, and in that aspect, she thinks that Ko and her are necessarily don't necessarily fall in line with what a relationship is, but they do know that because they started in a physical aspect, they can still grow into a more emotional and into a more deeper connection as to make Ko fall in love with her. So it was beautifully done, and Ko kind of like realized that, oh, okay, so this is what she means, that even though that we shouldn't be bound by kind of the aspects of what people perceive us as love, we can go about it in our own way. And that's what Nasuna just kind of nods, is like, yes, exactly. And then she takes him to the zoo, and this is where Ko kind of realized, oh, the zoo's pretty empty at night. So I think we can kind of summarize that there's certain parts of the night that are not lively as they are during the day, which is really interesting because throughout this entire anime we have seen essentially that the night has its own charm to it, and there's a lot of things that can only happen during the night. And in this first episode, we get to notice something that can only really happen and can really be experienced during the day. Which, when Nasuna was like telling them, okay, well, how about we drink some blood and then we can head back? And he obliges by that. She gets her fill of blood, and he almost blurts out that, oh, we should come here during the day, because he wanted to experience the zoo with her. But then it came to his head, like, okay, well, that's not going to work out because she's a vampire and I can't really be here with her during the day. So in that aspect, we have in the first episode just showing us a bit of the lack of freedom that comes with being a vampire, and also, while also showing us for most of it, like, the beauty of the night. So I really enjoyed this episode. Really great episode back. I'm rating it a 8 out of 10. Up next, we have Hell Teacher Jigoku Sensei Nube, episode 1. So, this show is technically about a teacher who goes and joins a school near an area that has had an increase of spiritual activity, and his goal or objective is to make sure his students are safe, as far as I can tell from the premise. So he joins the school, and he tries to make this big entrance as he's getting in, and people are already like kind of talking as he's about to approach, like, oh, we have a new teacher, I wonder what he's like. And we have this girl who is Kyoko, who happens to be like a childhood friend, or happens to remember him from way back in the day, and tells everybody like, oh, you know, he's an exorcist and he's the actual real deal. And everybody's kind of like looking at her like, nah, that's kind of like, isn't that kind of like whack, kind of like not true. And even one of the students there, Hiroshi, who seems to not really appreciate people diving into the spiritual stuff or into exorcism like that, that kind of like blows her away. And you can already see that there's an inkling of him having something weigh in his mind, just from the way he's kind of looking outward and just keeping to himself, not really speaking to anybody, trying to isolate himself. And as we have the teacher come in, he comes into this like really ghostly kind of theme, and completely fumbles as soon as he gets in, it changes to the next song, which is a completely different song, and kind of doesn't go with his vibe of being the exorcist, whatever. And he lets everybody know that he's Mr. Nuno, but they can call him Nube or Nube. Um, and right off the bat, they kind of try to tell him like, hey, well, if you're an exorcist, why don't you prove it to us? Like, there's this portrait that happens to move from time to time, and he's like, okay, well, perfect timing then. I guess I'll show you guys. He starts throwing salt and performs this ritual for like exorcism, and it as soon as the teacher arrives, another teacher arrives there, Ritsuko. She completely gets scared off from it, and it's like, don't attempt any of this stuff to scare. You're scaring the children. All this other stuff. And we see Hiroshi kind of have this mini segment to himself where it's like he tries to recall back to his experience with somebody who delves into the spiritual realm and whatnot, and he completely loses his cool and heads off. And he's out there and he's practicing soccer with his teammates, and this is when we start kind of really see that something's really wrong with them, something's really bothering them, and he ends up going off the rails and injures one of his teammates. And we see that now he really is trying to keep his cool, like something's really bugging him, like, and they try to confront him the next day at school, and he just completely loses it again, and pushes Kyoko, and he hurts her to the point where she starts bleeding. And we really see that he doesn't really mean it. He really feels sorry, but at the same time, he has no way of really controlling his anger, so to speak. So Nube, the kind of teacher that he is, kind of tells him, all right, why don't you come with me, and we can talk things out. And we instantly see somebody like look off as they're heading outside. It's one of the doctors that's like helping Hiroshi take care of his dad, and as soon as we get to this park, this baby couldn't stop crying, so Nube like goes to him and performs this ritual and removes like this kind of like worm spirit out of him. And this is when we find out that what Hiroshi has is something way worse than this worm. Like the thing that's inside of him actually is controlling him and is forcing these negative emotions to take over him. And if they don't take care of it, he could seriously end up hurting somebody to the point of no return. So he ends up after we end up realizing that he's taken over by this evil spirit and completely pushes the teacher away, and he starts rushing to be by himself, and he starts lamenting like, why am I like this? Why can't I control my anger? What's wrong with me? And as he's feeding the spirit negative emotions, you can see the spirit keeps getting stronger and stronger. And then it just really comes down to Kyoko, who tries to once again reason with Hiroshi, and it doesn't pan out well. He starts attacking her until the teacher Nube comes in and rescues her with his demon arm, which now we finally get to see what's under the glove, that he was hiding one of his hands with the glove. He finally takes it off, and we see that it's kind of like a very demonic arm, and it really does look like an arm from like Attack on Titan, which I remember seeing that the mangaka for Attack on Titan was heavily inspired by this piece of media. And so he uses that and is able to like really he tells Hiroshi to like, don't worry, I'm gonna save you and all this stuff. He manages to get the spirit away from inside of him and beats it. And now Hiroshi feels safe. It's like, all right, now we can finally like. Now he finally accepts the teacher for who he is as a kind person, and he apologizes for all his wrongdoings, and now wants to really make amends on everybody. But before the episode ends, they get attacked by the doctor that was seeing them get away, which leaves us on a very cliffhanger as Nube, the teacher, completely gets overpowered and he's holding Hiroshi by the neck. So, really good cliffhanger. And I gotta say, this animation for the show has been really, really good so far. First episode, easily a 7 out of 10. I really enjoyed that this anime is a reboot of a previous work that's already been done, just made more modernized for like the current audience of anime. And yeah, cannot wait. I'm excited to continue covering it. Hell Teacher Jigoku Sensei Nube episode 2. So I do like that this anime released the first 2 episodes back to back. Really makes it captivate the audience with a nice cliffhanger, and then getting the second episode, which involves a lot more action based kind of episode. So I like that it kicks off right where it left off with Hiroshi being detained by this we know Joko, and Kyoko once again tries to intervene, and she gets tossed aside. Typical. It seems like Kyoko's going to be one of those characters that just is always going to try to get involved despite the dangers that it is involved with the situation. And luckily for her, Nube was able to catch her and instantly goes to try to rescue Hiroshi. And we do get to understand a little bit more about the Nube's arm, which is like I do believe they said that he sealed one of the demons in his left arm to help him fight off other demons. So really cool a way to have like a demonic power within and stuff. And as soon as he catches up to this Yoko, who wants to perform this humanification ritual to allow him to transform into an actual human, I would assume, there is quite a bit. They say that there's quite a bit of requirements to do this ritual, which is, one, they have to find a human skull that's perfectly sized to theirs, and two, they have to have lived for a few centuries in order to be able to perform such ritual. And so this Yoko kind of found Hiroshi out of the blue and has since then been keeping eyes on him. And in fact, he is the one that made Hiroshi get the spirit within him that was causing him to injure and get angry and stuff. So we finally learn who caused it in this episode, and Nube tries to prevent all this from happening, but he gets a bit caught off guard as this Yoko has this ability to have illusion powers. So he ends up tricking Nube to that he had completely fallen off and had injured Hiroshi, but instead it was just an actual like cat, and tiger was involved. He saw a tiger go at him. It's really interesting because Nube notices, okay, well, his illusion powers kind of work on anything that moves. So anything that moves is going to give off a different illusion. which it was just going to make it a lot more harder for him to find the actual Hiroshi. So he starts seeing like the patterns that this Joker was doing, and he comes to realize like, okay, well, I just have to follow this pattern that he has set out, and I'll be able to find his location. And he does find it, but it was all thanks to Kyoko once again, who shows up, and because he has no idea how to get to the certain location that he needed to go, Kyoko kind of uses his phone and puts it in the GPS. So I do like that it has this kind of like balance between the sensei and how his weakness is kind of technology. So although he's very powerful when it comes to being aware of how to use current technology, he's pretty much a caveman per se. And we get to once again Yoko and Hiroshi, the Yoko and Hiroshi, as he's performing the ritual. Right before he gets to it, Nube shows up again, and it's like, okay, well, you're kind of intruding in what I need to do, so I kind of do have to take care of you now. So the Yoko and Nube are gonna start fighting, but first of all, they have this really great great animation of how Hiroshi was technically stuck in a clock, and the clock just cut his head off, but it turned out to be another illusion power. So right off the bat, we have Nube already in the back foot with this Yoko being able to trick him with his illusion power, and now he was fighting not only against time, but also he's fighting an opponent that's so much more stronger, not so much more stronger, but at least a bit stronger than him. And he is getting hit after hit, and it's really outstanding how much punishment Nube can take. He does end up getting Hiroshi back. After Hiroshi kind of like breaks away from the paralyzation spell that he was under, and that's when the real like fight begins. And the fight and animation was like really, really well done. I do think this was such a better showing of the anime. A lot better than definitely the first episode was more so just introducing the characters, and this one was like a bit more action. So I really enjoyed that, and I do like that even though Nube had the power of the demon hand, the Yoko was still like, oh, I am stronger, but he still was surprised at the kind of like sudden burst of power that Nube would acquire when using this demon hand. And he ended up beating the Yoko in the end, but he didn't do it alone because Hiroshi and Kyoko kind of turned on this magnet that allowed enough time for Nube to end up beating this Yoko as he got distracted by his weapon and all the other stuff he was throwing at him to go towards the magnet. And I do like that there was like a sense of, oh, you're actually quite strong. Can I get your name? And so Nube tells him his name, and it's like, well, until we meet again. And yeah, that's how they ended up wrapping that first monster. And I do like that in this episode kind of just solidified that Hiroshi was coming to understand his teacher, and he learned a lesson of like trusting and really getting to know his teacher's character. So he ended up saying that, yeah, this is my teacher and he's like the best. So I do like that they have this sort of relationship, like a sensei and student bond already forming. I love that. This kind of reminds me of how the great teacher Sasuke also was with the students, where he learned to appreciate the students and learn to get closer to the students so that they can form a stronger connection with one another. It's I'm just really impressed with this anime. So this episode, I think I'm gonna give it a 8 out of 10. Finally, up next we have The Water Magician, episode 1. I have to say this anime looks fantastic. The opening has very nice visuals, very has a lot of watercoloring in its visuals. The song is very fitting to the kind of anime that this one is being portrayed as. I do gotta say it feels a bit campy, the anime, but starts off really well with us getting to see Rio, our protagonist. He basically got isekai'd by Truck-kun, and he opens up with meeting a sort of like God, but he calls himself kind of more so a fallen angel, which very interesting. He called himself a fallen angel, as we later find out that he could, well, not necessarily find out, but we have an indication that there's a certain type of creature in this world that you are not supposed to meet, and it's called a Akuma or something like that, and those are supposedly fake fallen angels. Maybe it's related to this person that's portraying himself as God. But what I find really interesting about this anime is, even though it's an isekai, our protagonist isn't your typical hero protagonist that has to get sent to this other world to get rid of the demon lord or anything like that. Basically, he got done in way ahead of schedule for him, and he just wants to have a normal life, just a laid back life essentially. So he asks to be put in a place where he can just lay back and enjoy a comfortable life. And the god appeases him, sends him to this background countryside, gives him the magic of water, and sends him there. As we find out, he starts kind of like exploring a bit of how his magic works. So he calls in water balls, and he sends them as projectiles. He realizes he can make the water shapeshift on its own, and he then realizes, like, okay, well, at some point I'm gonna have to go, because they basically just handed him kind of like a starting pack with books of the monsters around the area, as well as like plants and herbs that he can find in that area, and also giving him like a stock supply of like 2 months. So within 2 months, he's gonna have to learn how to basically provide for himself. And one of his first tasks that he tried to figure out how to do is how to make fire. And to do so, he tried the typical stick maneuver that you see in survival series, but it didn't quite pan out for him. So he starts thinking if there's any way that he can use his water to help him. So he ends up realizing that his water can be broken down based on the molecules and on the atoms and stuff, and he can rearrange those to make himself make water shapeshift into ice. And later he finds out he can make it so that the water can come out hot or cold. So a lot of properties of water that he is exploring early on, which I found really interesting. And also, not a lot of anime try to dive into a whole progress of training and acquiring certain skills, which this one does. He starts practicing his ice making, and he realizes, okay, well, I don't even have to incantate my magic, because if I imagine it, I can make it become reality. And that's one of the main things that he learned from the god also. Like, the god kind of told him, listen, magic is all about imagination and practice. So that's what he tends to do. He starts imagining things a lot better. He starts practicing his magic more, and as time goes on, he starts realizing, okay, I'm improving. At first, it took him a lot longer to make icicle spears, and the water jets that he was producing were going so slow that it did no damage. It was just like splashing water. And then eventually he's able to produce ice lances at a rapid rate, and then eventually his water jets are as powerful enough to cut rocks and steel. So I love the progression that we're seeing in the anime, and also like that it's showing us that things require hard work and practice in order to achieve. And then we take those and apply them to his hunting, because he's starting to real as the episode goes on, you see time pass. So now he's at a point where he needs to start gathering his food and herbs and replenish his supply. So he goes out, and his first target was to find more herbs and more stuff. And he encounters a boar, which is like a monster, but it's like the weakest type of monster, which I do like that. Even though it was like the weakest monster, since it was the first monster he encountered, he was still fearful of what it could do. Like to the point he started having flashbacks of his previous life, and how in his previous life he couldn't avoid the truck coming in, but in here he finds the courage enough to overcome that fear, and he jumps out of the way and starts using his ice magic to, in a creative way, to take it out, like making it slip and then creating a bunch of ice spears that to end up beating the boar. And then afterwards he goes back, keeps practicing some more, and we learn that there's also dragons in this world. So dragons are seen as like ferocious creatures, and if encountered, you have to flee. Even though, like, for the majority of times, if you encounter a dragon, you're pretty much done for, because they are strong enough to obliterate cities without breaking a sweat. So up next, he goes out and encounters his next opponent, which is an assassin hawk. And this is where we find out that a lot of the monsters can also possess magic. And one of the magics that this assassin hawk can do is like invisible airstrikes. So like using wind magic, he can use it to cut him up. But I love that because of all the practice that we've seen him do up to this point, he's able to use his ice magic to create barriers to protect himself from getting attacked from behind as he's running away from it. And then eventually he's able to use his ice magic to take out the hawk's eye, and the hawk, he didn't end up killing the hawk, but he did end up letting it go. He did end up letting it go, and then encounter it later when it evolved into a higher monster. So there's definitely a higher. I like that there's sort of a evolution period for monsters. Like they can also go and become stronger themselves, not just humans. So I found that really interesting. And then we also have another encounter that he has with the Dullahan, and this one's kind of like interesting because we don't really notice it that it was going to be something important, but later on, on his first encounter with it didn't seem like it was going to lead to anything. And then once we meet him again, he goes and faces it, and it seems like this Dullahan is helping him develop his swordsmanship. And at one point, he ends up handing him a sword and tells him to kind of like practice making it into like a water sword slash ice sword, whatever. And in doing so, is the reason why he is able to beat the evolved assassin hawk, as he uses the sword, which we then later find out as Rio encounters an actual dragon that is able to talk to him through telepathy, that this sword is actually special. It belongs to it was the sword of the fairy king. And through this, like we now have like the sword is of importance And with the dragon being here, we learned something else about Ryo, that he has developed this hidden trait that was only seen like 10,000 years ago, which is the eternal youth trait, which I'm assuming is why he is able to talk to dragons. And I'm assuming this is why dragons are not, why the dragon wasn't violent towards them. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this episode. It ends off in a decent, like, enough cliffhanger with us meeting another person that was in the opening. At the end, he washed ashore, and yeah, I'm excited to see how Ryo and this other person kind of bond and see how the dynamic goes. But this episode was really great. I'm giving it a 8 out of 10, and that's gonna be it for this podcast episode. I think if you enjoy what I'm talking about, you should hit the like, the subscribe button, leave a comment, and until next time, bye.